Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the first session of the Project Management 101 series. The second session will be on February 3rd at 7 p.m. My name is Raluca Barbu, and I am the Adult Programming Specialist at the Algonquin Area Public Library. This program was made possible through the collaboration of 15 neighboring libraries. Joining us tonight is PMI-certified instructor Michael Spilg to offer a beginner-friendly overview of project management methods. The recording of this program will be available on the library's YouTube channel in a few days. This is a Zoom webinar, so your microphone and camera will be turned off as an attendee. You can enable closed captioning and ask questions through the Q&A feature or chat, and Michael will gladly answer them at the end of the presentation. And now I will turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Raluca, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining me tonight and listening in on my presentation as I introduce project management. So my name is Michael Spilg, and my background is in international relations and mechanical engineering. I have a little over 5 years of professional work experience as an engineer, mainly in the medical device field, and I'll be starting a new role as project manager in a couple weeks. I joined PMI a little over a year ago in December 2024, which is the Project Management Institute. And since then, I've earned my PMP and ACP certificates. So those are the Project Management Professional and Agile Certified Practitioner certificates administered by the PMI organization. The PMI, which is the Project Management Institute, is the gold standard for the project management field. They describe themselves as the leading global nonprofit organization for project, program, and portfolio management. Some of their credible certificates include the PMP, the ACP, the RMP, which is the Risk Management Professional, and the CAPM, the Certified Associate Project Manager. So I'll begin by answering the question, what is project management? The PMI flagship guide, the PMBOK, which stands for the Project Management Book of Knowledge, defines project management as the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements, focusing on initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing a project to achieve specific goals, acting as a framework of processes, best practices, and standards overseen by the PMI. The part that I had highlighted in yellow are the 5 stages for the project lifecycle. So to further understand a project, it's maybe helpful to compare it to operations. So a project is a temporary endeavor that has a clearly defined start date and end date. They tend to be change focused as they are introducing a new product or improving an existing process or service, whereas operations are the continuous repetitive part of the business systems. On the right side of the slide is the project triangle. These are the 3 main parts of all projects: cost, time, and scope, or budget, schedule, and the features that you're building out through the project. All project elements should encompass some aspect of quality as well, because you don't want your end product to not be usable in the intended way. So you should be maintaining a high standard of quality throughout the project development as part of the project too. Recently, the Harvard Business Review had an article, The Project-Driven Organization, which further compared project-driven projects or project-driven businesses to operations-driven businesses. Today explained the history of business development from the late 19th to early 20th century around operations-driven business styles to the modern day project-driven focus. And in between, around the turn of the 21st century, businesses were also introduced to Agile methodology as an iterative approach for software product teams to build out and develop prototypes for their software products in a continuous and iterative improvement way. Whereas the project-driven mentality of businesses allows for enterprise-wide transformation to drive most business activities so that Businesses now can fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. This allows them to learn from their mistakes early and incorporate the lessons learned so that they are able to be more productive sooner and quicker. So just a little bit of a shout out. I am holding virtual study groups starting in February. So every Thursday in February. This is going to be through PMI. And if you're interested in joining, go ahead and scan the QR code on the left side of the screen. There's also a CAPM study group that is on that website as well. If you're interested to attend a lunch and learn session through PMI, they're having one of the architects for the PMBOK 8, which was recently released in November. He'll be speaking on the changes made to the PMBOK on January 28th, remotely as well. You can go ahead and sign up with the QR code on the right. With the PMP, it will be, the PMP is going to be changed and reflective of the PMBOK 8 starting in July of this year. So if you are studying for your PMP already, you may be studying the PMBOK 7, and it would be really important for you to take the exam before they make those changes in July. So just a little shout out piece of advice there. The rest of my presentation, I have structured around the 5 following groups, and then I'll end it with some recommendations for you to continue to pursue your professional development or interest in project development. But I'm going to introduce the main project methodologies being traditional waterfall projects and agile adaptive projects. And I'll explain a little bit about what a hybrid project is. Then I'll go into the role of project managers and how a project manager relates to a product manager and a scrum master. I'll also explain an introduction to project management tools, including the work breakdown structure and Gantt charts, which are 2 commonly used tools for traditional projects. And then I'll explain Kanban boards, priority backlogs, and burn down charts, which are tools used on agile projects. I'll also cover stakeholder engagement, as project managers are often seen as people managers. So having a strong understanding of conflict management and the Tuckman team building model is really critical to project management success. And then I'll end things off with some recommendations around different prompt structures for requirement prioritization and user story development, including the Moscow model, feature-driven development, behavior-driven development, and the invest prompt structure. And then lastly, I'll end things with some references and resources for you to further explore if you're interested in learning more about project management on your own time. The 2 main types of projects are a traditional project and an agile project. So with a traditional waterfall or predictive project style, the product team is going to build out their deliverables in a linear or sequential fashion. So that means when one work item is completed, that is sort of the trigger to begin work on the next work item. Most of these traditional teams also emphasize a specialty-based role, whereas in an agile project, these projects are iterative. So they are going to build out the prototype in iterations so that they are continuing to improve the product based on the highest valued priorities for the project. And they also highly value cross-functional teams. So having team members or stakeholders with deep discipline knowledge that are also able to collaborate across different stakeholder interest groups. Another way to compare waterfall and agile projects is to look at the project triangle. With a waterfall project, this is a really useful project model if you are beginning your project with a clear understanding of what you are intending to produce. So the requirements or the features of the project are fixed, as seen in the plan-driven red triangle in the center. But then you are going to have flexible or estimates for your budget and your timeline. So you may have a cost or a schedule that allows you to go over or under those estimates. But the main objective of a waterfall project is to make sure that you're building out the intended objectives or requirements that you started um, with when you started the project. Whereas an agile project kind of flips the triangle on its head, and the features or the requirements are now going to be the flexible component of the project. So this is going to drive value because the project team is going to work on building out the highest value priorities first. And they are going to continue to evaluate and keep a backlog of their priorities as they build out their project. And this allows them to start the project with a fixed cost or schedule. So, in other words, they are kind of building out as many high value priority features that they can fit within the cost and schedule constraints. So, all projects kind of go through the life cycle as defined by PMI, where the first stage is project initiation, followed by project planning, then project execution, project monitoring and controlling, and then project closure. Some businesses follow a phase gate development model where a leadership or a sponsor committee will evaluate the project's feasibility and how it reflects the overall business's strategic objectives or other portfolio initiatives. And if they get the green light for the project, then they'll form the project team. The project team will then work through the requirement phase, the design phase, the development phase, the testing phase, the deployment phase, and then hand off the product and the knowledge transfer will go to the operations side in phase 6, and that will close out the project. And Agile will kind of continue the continuous improvement element of Lean. So it's more than just a methodology, it's kind of a mindset because it really impacts how the team is structured, how the project is going to be built out. There's a lot of different frameworks within the Agile umbrella. You have Scrum, Crystal, Extreme Programming, Feature-Driven Development, DSDM, AUP, Scrum Band. There's several others, but they all kind of utilize a similar Agile process, which is the iteration. So you'll start off with a priority backlog, which again lists the highest priority features that the project is intended to build. And the product owner will then work with the development team through the iteration planning and pick out those highest priority features and move them into the sprint backlog. The development team will be referenced to kind of assign a numerical representation of how much effort needs to be put into building out those prioritized features, and then work throughout the rest of the iteration through daily reviews to kind of build out those features into the prototype or the product. So then at the end or near the end of the iteration, you'll have an iteration review, and that's where the product team is, or the development team is able to review the work that they have accomplished or any roadblocks that they've encountered during the iteration with other interested stakeholders, possibly the sponsor or the customer as well. And then at that point, you have an iteration retrospective, which is when the development team can kind of reflect back and review lessons learned from the iteration, make improvements, and kind of go through the cycles again until you achieve the finished work. So some of the key roles to understand for project management are the project manager, the product design owner, and the scrum master. So the project manager, their main role is to ensure that the project deliverables are produced on time, within budget, and according to scope. They are responsible to remove impediments or blockers from negatively impacting the team, mainly external conflicts that would distract day-to-day work of the team. So they're the main person to communicate with the sponsor. They can also introduce opportunities that might fuel or streamline some success for the project team as well. The product design owner, their key responsibility is to maintain the priority backlog. They kind of act as the voice of the customer as they understand the customer and the user needs, and they ensure that the delivery of the features that meet the top customers' needs are the ones that the product team is addressing first with each iteration. And then lastly, Scrum Master. In the Scrum methodology, you will have a Scrum Master who sort of coaches the team on best practices. So focusing on improving processes for the development team, they also facilitate Scrum events such as the planning, the daily Scrum, the review, retrospectives, and they'll also foster continuous improvement and do other activities as helping the product owner maintain the back.
Michael, can you tell us what Scrum means?
So Scrum is a agile framework that really focuses on continuous improvement, but it really kind of follows the same iterations. So as you have in this example or display, you have the iteration. You might call this the Scrum. You might have, instead of daily reviews, you have Scrum reviews. So it's kind of a framework within the Agile umbrella. And some of the project tools that you would use for a predictive project include the work breakdown structure and the Gantt chart. So the work breakdown structure is a template that tracks the work packages, which are kind of your work blocks or your work chunks that, when combined, will produce the final deliverables for the project. And because it's a predictive project, you want to take a sequential approach when working through the work packages. So the completion of one work package sort of triggers the start of the work for the next work package. A little bit of a tip for the PMP: if you do see any questions around work breakdown structures, then you know that you're working or being asked about a predictive project. So that's just a small tip to keep in mind. But then another tool for predictive projects is the Gantt chart. So Gantt chart will list tasks alongside the schedule with the intended target of when the tasks should be completed. And this allows the project manager to be able to compare the expected and actual targets for delivery. So here's sort of an illustrative example of a work breakdown structure where you have the project kind of broken up into different deliverables, which might be owned by different stakeholders. And then those deliverables are further broken down into work packages. Here's an example of a Gantt chart. So the skinny dark blue bar represents the deliverable, and the turquoise rectangle represents the work package within a specified deliverable. So between week 2 and week 4, for example, you have a deliverable with 3 work packages, and the completion of one work package will trigger the start of the work for the next work package, and so on. And then when the deliverable is complete, you have reached a milestone, which is represented by this turquoise diamond. So it kind of allows you to set a schedule and keep track of progress in that format. Another example of kind of working with a work breakdown structure and a Gantt chart is from this project development plan. It's not a personal development plan, it's a project development plan. But when I was doing a mentorship program with the PMI Chicagoland chapter, I did a project where I built out different tutorials around using AI tools. But I specified the objectives, which is equivalent to the deliverables, and kind of broke down those objectives into different activities, which you could see as work packages. And then on the right side of the project development plan is sort of the Gantt chart being built in alongside the work breakdown. And from this, I was able to track my intended schedule and then keep track of any progress that I made. I also kept track of cancellation of any tasks just to kind of have that transparency built into my project development plan. So moving on, some project tools that you might use if you're working on an agile team or Agile project are the Kanban board, the priority backlog, and the burn down chart. The Kanban board is a visual radiator that will display the work in progress, and it's a useful tool for the team to identify any bottlenecks. Whereas the priority backlog is a tracker where the product owner will keep track of the most valuable requirements by listing them at the top. And you can also adjust the priority backlog for risk or include other aspects of building out products or projects, such as including regulations or compliance requirements, along with those value-driven features. So all of that would be tracked then in a priority backlog, and that would be maintained by the product owner. Then you also have a burn down chart. So this is another visual chart that displays the amount of work completed relative to the amount of work left to do. And from a burn down chart, you can also interpret the project velocity, which would be the ideal rate of work to be done over each time block. So here's an example of a Kanban board. So you have a column with your action items under the to-do column. You have another column with action items in progress, and then you have your final column for your action items that have been completed or done. And from this tool, you want to maintain a predefined WIP or work in progress, which is the number of action items that you would have in the in progress column. And you don't want to exceed, because you don't want to overburden or juggle too many tasks, because then you kind of lose what the main priorities are. So it's really important to kind of maintain a WIP value. So in this example, the WIP might be 4. Once one of these action items is completed, it can be moved into the done column, and that triggers the team to pull an action item from the to-do column into the in progress column. And then for your priority or product backlog, again, this is maintained by the product owner. This would be a listing of your highest priorities based on perceived value to the customer. And you can add and remove requirements at any time. An example of a burn down chart is shown on the screen. But in this example, the product team might have allotted a certain number of features that they've determined to be equivalent to 80 effort points or user story points worth of work. So it's kind of a numerical representation for how much work the development team needs to set aside to complete these features. And maybe in this example, they have 5 weeks to complete 80 points worth of work. So in an ideal situation, they would maintain a velocity or a work pace of 16 points per week. And this is represented by the pink line. And the blue line represents the actual work that they've completed. So maybe after the first week, they had a lot of enthusiasm and they started off strong and did 30 points worth of work. And so they were left with 50 points. Maybe they've kind of lost steam. By the end of the second week, they only did 10 points worth of work. So now they're left with 40 points. But they're still ahead of schedule because they're on the left side of their intended or ideal work pace. But maybe after week 2, the product owner was reached out by the customer, and the customer wanted a feature that the product team determined was 15 points worth of work. So maybe after they started week 2, they kind of went back to having 55 points worth of work. They were only able to complete 10 points. So that's why they've kind of gone back, and they're left with 45 points of work at the end of week 3. So now they are behind schedule. After week 3, they do 10 more points worth of work. And at the end of week 4, they're now left with 35 points and only 1 week left to complete it. But somehow they get it all together and they are able to complete the project on time, so that by week 5, they have 0 points left. So a burn down chart is a useful tool because it kind of represents the ideal rate of work, and it keeps track of how much work the team is actually doing relative to that ideal situation. And it's an easy visual to kind of gauge if the team is falling behind or ahead of schedule. Some other vocabulary terms that are really useful to be familiar with for Agile teams include the T-shaped team member. So because Agile teams are really built around cross-functional collaboration, it's really useful to have your stakeholders have a deep discipline expertise, but also cross-discipline knowledge in terms of how they are going to work with the other stakeholders on the team. As mentioned with the burn down chart, user story points are sort of a numerical representation for how much effort the development team needs to put into building out the desired features. So this is something the development team would assign because they would have the best knowledge in terms of how much work they need to put into one feature relative to another feature. And the work done per interval, that is the velocity. But an important distinction, I guess, between the priority backlog and the sprint backlog is that once you have priorities introduced into a sprint, they should not be taken out. Only if the product owner decides that priorities are no longer needed for the product, can they be removed from the sprint. If for whatever reason the product team isn't able to complete the features that they start the iteration within the sprint backlog, they shouldn't just move them back into the product backlog. They should review any roadblocks or any reasons why they weren't able to complete those priorities with the interested stakeholders during the iteration or Scrum review. So that's a little bit more about user story points. And lastly, rolling wave planning is just the technique of kind of allocating work to focus on those top priorities so that you're only planning the details for the priorities or the features that the team is going to be working on in the near future. And any priorities that are on the backlog don't need to have as many details defined until they reach the top of the list. So that approach is called the rolling wave planning. All right, so another area of project management is stakeholder engagement. So it's really important for project managers to understand the human element of working on projects. They should have a skill set around conflict management to be able to resolve disagreements, to foster collaboration, and they should have a high-level understanding of the Tuckman model for team building. So some conflict management techniques include competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. And it's really critical for the project manager to kind of use their best judgment to decide when to intervene or help resolve a conflict, to be able to bring stakeholders together, to be able to move the project forward, because you don't want to have a conflict kind of delaying the progress of the project. You want to kind of act as a mediator to resolve any issues so that you don't have as many impediments blocking your projects. And then the Tuckman model for team building begins with forming the team. So after a new team is created, you may go through a storming phase, which would be a time where the team members are kind of figuring each other out, are learning how to negotiate or collaborate, what the expectations are from each other. And it's helpful if the project manager can intervene at this time. One tool that they might use to facilitate productive conversations is to have a team charter. So this would be a useful document for the team to set what their norms are and the expectations of each other are, so that the project team then can kind of move into a norming phase and then hopefully move into optimal performance. And then they are able to adjourn the project with a successful project. So some of the requirement prioritization models that I'll highlight here include the Moscow model. So this involves having a list of your features and assigning them into the four categories: must have, should have, could have, won't have, based on criticality. So the most important and critical features would then go into the must have section. And then any other important features that would be important for the product to have, but maybe don't make or break the product, um, could go into a should have section. And anything that would be nice to have. So these might be additional features that would make the product stand out to competitors that could go into the could have section. And anything that is out of scope or is something that maybe the project team decides they want to introduce in another version, that can be left in the won't have section. And once you have a sense of how many priorities and what those priorities are for must have, should have, could have, and won't have, you can go back and kind of work with the development team to assign an estimated effort level. This way, you can kind of have a better understanding of expectations so that then you are able to follow through on your promises in terms of what features you will be able to introduce with the product launch. And when you're working on your priorities, it's important to kind of build out your features in a user story format. And it's helpful for the project team to kind of come to an agreement in terms of how they want to have their user stories represented. So one model to use is the invest, which is having your user stories be independent, so that they can be delivered and tested separately. They can be negotiable, so they're not in a fixed contract and they're open to cross-functional discussion. You want them to be valuable. It needs to be clear who and how value is going to be created for, and estimable, so the team can roughly size the effort that needs to be assigned to the user story. If it is too large, you can break it down because you want to make sure that the user story is small enough that it can be completed within a sprint. And then it needs to be testable. It needs to have a clear acceptance criteria. This can either be a quantitative or qualitative definition of done. So it's important to have some sort of structure when building out your user stories. Other approaches might be feature-driven development. So instead of building out user stories to complete specific tasks, you might break them down into specific features. So the feature-driven development resembles an action result object template. So in the example that I have on the slide, calculate monthly spending on a dashboard. So this might be part of a feature that you want to introduce into a business app. But it takes the format of introducing what action is going to be done and what the result is and what object or where this feature will be displayed. Another approach is the behavior-driven development model, and this involves having a given, when, then template. So given a type of user, when they are trying to achieve some sort of goal or action, then you see a certain benefit or value. So for example, if you are building out a clinician alert, you may write it out so that as a clinician, I want to be alerted when a patient's vitals fall outside safe ranges so that I can intervene quickly to prevent harm. You may even develop this user story further by specifying what the safe ranges are or how quickly you want to intervene to kind of give it that acceptance criteria so that the development team can also test on it. And I guess to wrap things up, if you're interested in continuing to develop your project management skills, some additional resources I would recommend are YouTube and Udemy. So one really useful YouTuber is David McLaughlin. He has several playlists around different project management tool sets, as well as the different PMI certificates. When I took the PMP, one of the prerequisites is to take a certified 30-hour course. So I took Andrew Ramdalyal's class on Udemy. I'd also recommend checking out the PMI Study Hall website. This is really useful. It's $50 for 3 months, and you have access to a practice exam, practice quizzes, flashcards, other practice material to help you be prepared for the exam. The Chicagoland chapter has their meetings on the second Wednesday of every month, and there's also a portfolio or a library of online webinars that are available to PMI members so that if you are interested in any specific framework or sub area of project management, you can do a quick search and probably find a presentation that's available for free to all my members. If you're interested in learning more about Agile, there's a list of some of the frameworks under the Agile umbrella. I guess a few to take note of are the SAFe model. This is built out around Agile release trains or applying Agile principles to programs or portfolios. Extreme programming is commonly used with software development teams because it takes the Agile approach to the extreme and usually has very small timeframe iterations and is built around test-driven development. And then you have Crystal, which emphasizes criticality. So just to have a few shout outs again, I'm having PMP study groups held every Thursday for the month of February, and you can sign up with the QR code in the upper left corner. If you're interested in attending the lunch presentation on PMBOK 8, feel free to scan the QR code on or in the upper right corner. If you're interested to attend my next presentation about AI tools for project managers, the link is available through the QR code in the lower right corner. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or email me at michaelspilg@gmail.com. My LinkedIn is available with the QR code in the lower left corner. And I do have one more shout out. So every summer for the last 3 years, I've been working with this organization called Global Volunteers in Poland, and they are working with a local summer camp for Polish and Ukrainian refugee children. And I'm planning to go back again this summer, but I'm helping them raise funds to sponsor Ukrainian children to be able to attend summer camp. So if you'd be able to help my fundraiser, I have a GoFundMe page accessible through this QR code on the screen. Any donation of any size would really go a long way. I've been there 3 times now, and I really see the impact that this program has on the kids. And it'd be really great to be able to contribute to their sponsorship program as well. But thank you
Wonderful,
all for
Michael.
attending, and
Thank
I look
you.
forward to
We have some
hearing any
questions.
feedback.
Actually, we have a lot of questions, Michael, for you.
Oh,
So,
okay,
yeah, I'll go
perfect.
ahead and start with what Kim asked. Is there a place to find reusable downloadable tools or templates that we can use for our own projects?
Yes, you can find a lot of pre-built templates for project management online. I know that the Google workspace has a lot of options to build out different project management tools. For example, you can build a Gantt chart in Google, Google's version of Excel. So you can start there. You can also go to David McLaughlin's page. I think he sells a portfolio of different project management tools for a low price, and they're pre-built. So you'd be able to purchase his items as well. But there's a lot of project management templates that are available online that you can use at your expense or interest.
Okay. Robert is asking, how can you define user story?
Yeah, so the user story is a way that you would describe a priority that you want to have introduced into the product or the project. So it's really up to the project team to decide on how they are going to define how a user story is going to be structured. So this is sort of what I touched on loosely at the end. There's different approaches that you can take, either feature-driven development, behavior-driven development, test-driven development. This would be how you write out user stories, and this is then going to affect how the development team is going to um, build those features or priorities into the product.
Okay. I have another question on the Kanban board. Is the color coding a standard, such as green means X and blue means Y, or is it arbitrary for each project?
Yeah, I don't think there's really a color coding to the Kanban. Um, I think in the example that I had, I just had 3 columns. So I had a to-do column, in progress, and then a done column. I think if you're working on maybe a software development project, you might expand the in progress column into three different columns. So you might have a to-do column, and then you might have a design, a development, and a testing columns, and then a done column. So I think it would vary based on your project, how many columns you have, but it doesn't need to be color coded.
Okay. Is the CAPM a useful and valuable certification for career growth?
I haven't taken the CAPM. So this is the associate level project manager certificate. So if you haven't had experience working on complex professional projects, it would be a really great place to start, because the PMP and the other certificates have a prerequisite of at least 3 years of professional project experience to be able to qualify for those certificates. So it really depends on where you are in your professional um, career. But if you are just starting off, if you are just coming out of school or looking to kind of make a career change, then I would say the CAPM is a great place to start.
Okay, so and another one is what industries would you say project management can apply to? And
Yeah, I
then,
think,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, there was like IE, HR, OD, or what else?
Okay. I think project management is, it covers a lot of different industries from healthcare to construction to human resources, even to education. When I did the PMI mentorship project, some of the other mentees in the program were teachers. So I think the project management concepts can be applied across multiple industries. I know with the PMI Chicagoland chapter, we recently had a career conference, and I looked over the attendee list, and there were people from at least 50 different companies, ranging from aerospace to medical devices to government roles. So it really is applicable across multiple disciplines.
Okay, and then a lot of people are asking if you can add the QR codes as links to your presentation. That would help them out.
Okay.
So before
Yeah,
you send it to me so I can send it to everybody else.
yeah. I'll
Uh,
put a list together and send that to you with the
okay,
links.
nice. And then there's another question. Can you give an example of a real life professional project that would go through one of these processes?
Um, sure. So I was working at a medical device manufacturer, and they used the 6 phase gate model for their new product development. So they had the feasibility that kind of reviewed the necessity of the project, and then it went through requirements, design, development, testing, monitoring and controlling before it reached off into deployment and operations. So I've seen the phase gate model be used for new product development for a hardware project as well.
Okay, let me see if there's anything else. Everybody's thanking you. They thought it was very useful. They're looking forward to the next one. So thank you everybody for joining us. I hope this was helpful to you. I will make sure to send out a video recording link and also the slides that Michael shared. And I will see you all on February 3rd. Take care and stay warm. Good night.
Thank you.